All right, let's go ahead and get started with our speakers. Our first speaker is Yutia Liu from NAU. And stop sharing here. Oh, we did. Great. All right.
Stop sharing this. Great.
Love it. Good job. Is this volume okay? Up, down? Great. All right.
Okay, thank you, Cole. Good morning, everyone. I'm Yujie Liu from Northern Arizona University. Okay. Okay, I think I can start now. I will be sharing our findings about a great level of agreement between neon and AmeriFlux measurements. Uh, Let me start a bit of a background for the project. I guess you may already know that AmeriFlux network is with a bottom-up fashion, and AmeriFlux network has been connecting independently managed sites in diverse ecosystem. Some of AmeriFlux sites has data records for more than 25 years. But most of them operate on a 3 to 5 year time horizon. However, none are guaranteed to continue for decades into the future. Neon is a new network which is initiated in 2017, aiming to provide high quality data over a 30-year period. Integrating new Neon data with pre-existing AmeriFlux data could provide a robust understanding of the past and future trajectory of ecosystem change. This brings us to a question: can we stitch directly the two data streams together? Before answering that, we need to understand the level of continuity regarding the variables for meteorology, fluxes, and flux footprints. We identified 50 pairs across 9 neon domains. We have drylands in Arizona and New Mexico, 1 pair in Florida, 2 pairs in New England region, 2 pairs in Great Lake area, 1 plural size on Great Plains, 1 pair on Oak Ridge, and 2 pairs in the Rocky Mountain area. 1 is a forest pair, and another one is above the tree line. That's the tundra pair, and 4 subarctic sites in Alaska. And those parasites span a wide range of biomass, with exceptions for temperate and tropical rainforest. Now we are looking at the results for half-hourly CO2 fluxes. Here in the scatter plot, I have AmeriFlux data on x-axis and neon data on y-axis. Out of the 15 paired sites we look at, only 6 showed good agreement. You can see the points form tight ellipse, closely following the one-to-one line. However, the agreement isn't perfect. The intercept differed from 0 and the slope deviated from 1, indicating systematic offsets between AmeriFlux and neon sites. For other paired sites, we observed a weaker agreement. The scatter plots look like diffuse point cloud, so I put a blob here to represent the pattern. You may also notice high variability of noise and substantial deviation from the one-to-one line. Then we need to ask a question: to what extent offsets at half-hourly scale propagate to the annual scale? To ensure valid calculation for the annual sums, we first gather the flux data using a machine learning model called XGBoost. And we have a breakout session later today, and it will be a hands-on tutorial. I will walk you through the workflow. So now let's get back to the results for the annual sums. Uh, I know it's a little bit scary to look at all of the panels all together, but the short but important message is that annual CO2 fluxes integrals provide strongly contrasting views of carbon balance between neon and AmeriFlux measurements. And this holds true also for the sites where we already observed good agreement in CO2 fluxes at half-hourly scale. So I highlighted them in yellow boxes here. And then if you take a close at the results for Barrow and UD, I have the green circles here. Uh, for the two panels, you might notice the similar wiggles of the annual variations. So that means there was consistent offsets in annual sums across different years between neon and AmeriFlux, but you won't spot it anywhere else. Given the differences in measured fluxes, we need to understand, we want to explain um, the reasons. So here we want to figure out what the traverse is. We use the flux footprint model to provide information about where the measured fluxes are coming from surrounding landscape. There are a couple of points I want to make here. First, since the measurement height for neon was generally higher than that for AmeriFlux, with only two exceptions for Oak Ridge and Willow Creek sites. As a result, the footprint area for neon was generally larger than that for AmeriFlux. But out of the 15 paired sites we evaluated here, only two of them had overlapping footprints. So here in the top right, I'm showing an example for Bartlett experimental forest where you can observe the overlapping of the footprints. But for other sites, as the two towers, they are located farther apart, so the footprints are not overlapping. Here I'm showing example for the tundra pair in Navarre Ridge. Based on the information for flux footprints, we further calculated another matrix called Bray-Curtis dissimilarity, with 0 means identical composition and 100% means complete dissimilarity. Here in the figure, I put the metric for land cover on x-axis and that for EVI on y-axis. The first thing to notice is that the dissimilarity of land cover ranged from very low dissimilarity to moderately high dissimilarity. This kind of makes sense. If there's a huge difference in land cover, we won't consider it as a pair to evaluate. And then, but for dissimilarity for EVI was much more variable, and it is not correlated with that for land cover. Now, if you take a close look at the sites here in the bottom left corner, those are sites with low dissimilarity in both land cover and EVI, and they are actually consistent with the sites where we found good agreement in half-hourly CO2 fluxes. From earlier parts of my presentation, I mainly focused on the results for CO2 fluxes, but I think you know eddy current system also measures meteorological variables, sensible and latent heat fluxes. To put all of the results for different variables together, we designed this continuity scorecard. Here is the example for Bartlett experimental forest, and the results for this manuscript is under minor review before it's available in the journal ACT format. The similar continuity scorecard was also done for other parasites. So now I just want to walk you through some general patterns for all parasites. First, there were good agreement for air temperature and the relative humidity observed by Neon and AmeriFlux. For PPFD, the good agreement was found for 4 parasites located less than 1 kilometers. For soil temperature, 50% of the parasites showed good agreement. At half-hourly scale, for CO2 fluxes and latent heat fluxes, the agreement in paired measurements were generally lower than that for sensible heat fluxes. At annual scale, we didn't find good agreement for all measured fluxes. Putting things together, we come to our take-home message. The main takeaway is, first, for most parasites, the pattern of annual variations were different. For most that year, the annual carbon balance for neon and AmeriFlux appears to be different by 50 grams of carbon per square meters per year, and this value is thought to be the uncertainty for annual sums. Agreement at half-hourly scale does not translate into good agreement at annual scale once gap filling is done. Lastly, how to recognize a single tower may not adequately capture broader ecosystem. So that's it. I'm open to questions.
We have lots of time for questions. Are there any out there?
Did you look at the site's sonic and erga similarities compared to the fluxus similarity? So whether the paired sites had the same sonic and erga. I don't think people can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have another microphone or is it just
Yeah,
this one?
If you use the mic, then the people on Zoom can hear your question.
Use the mic.
I was wondering if you've looked at whether the sonic and erga similarities between the paired sites were related to the similarities in the fluxes or not.
I don't fully get the question. Are you asking about sonic anemometer or like wind speed?
Yeah, I'm asking about whether if you looked at the sites where you have agreement or not, whether they differed in the type of sonic anemometer and the type of erga infrared gas analyzer they use.
Yes, they do have different sensors, and I don't have the detailed information now, but we are contracting SciPIs for providing like the model of different sensors, and we are trying to put it as a table as appendix in the manuscript. So I have some of the information now. Maybe we can chat about that later. They do use different models for flux measurements, both neon and AmeriFlux.
All of
That would just be dependent on the anemometer, not.
Yes, we looked at the agreement for sensible heat fluxes. The general conclusion is the agreement at half-hourly scale was better than that for CO2 fluxes and latent heat fluxes. But once gap filling is done again, we didn't find a good agreement at annual scale for sensible heat fluxes.
And maybe a quick comment or addition. So as you know, the AmeriFlux tech team conducted a lot of site visits over the last 20 years, meaning we deployed similar instruments on towers. We have I'm going to throw my colleagues under the bus, but we have a paper in draft form that's hopefully will submit soon. But we never saw discrepancy like this. I mean, and we looked at in different components, as you said, sonic anemometry, vertical wind components, ergas. And those differences that you show are stunning to me. So one, I don't know why, but I think we need to dig a little bit more into this because having annual sum that different is a concern to me a little bit, although the footprint, as you showed, were very dissimilar. But some sites, like especially in the Arctic, when even if the footprint is different, I would expect maybe the annual sum being a little bit closer. You have sites in NGB and I forgot the name for that, but it should be more comparable, I guess. So I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I just have one thing to add for NJB. The thing is because the fluxes are not measured during winter, so for that size, they specifically had growth seeing sums instead of the annual sums. So that's probably one reason you'll see the similar wiggles in annual sums for barrel.
Oh,
Yeah, yes. So my name is Alta Foren. So I will just comment. I think the worry for the annual agreement should not be that much because you are including the gap filling there. So if you run different methods of the gap filling, we always get different numbers for annual. So from my perspective, I would be more happy if I have an agreement at the half hourly time scale. So that would be the more important. So annual differences may not be that because within a same site, different gap filling methods will give you a different number.
Yeah, I agree with that. Different gap filling algorithm may result in different absolute values for the annual sums. And then in our work for Berlet experimental forest, we use an alternative machine learning method, neural network. And actually, we found consistent annual sums as compared to XGBoost one. So we're still thinking about for this multi-site research, if we want to add another methods to compute the annual sums.
I thank you. That was really interesting. I'm curious if you took a step beyond the annual sum. So that was pretty compelling that you can't stitch these data records together, but in terms of annual sums, but in terms of like the relationships between different variables and how the ecosystem responds, can you stitch any of that together or can you just, none of it can be stitched together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for some meteorological variables like air temperature, relative humidity, it's still possible if you build up a linear model, it's still possible to get use data from another sites. But for flux data, we have to be really cautious about stitching them together.
EJ, could you just go back to this just goes back to Altaf's comment. Could you go back to the slide where you have the scatter plots of FCO2? So in a lot of cases here, Altaf, just to get back to the gap filling question, the intercept is, 0.18, negative 0.75, 0.2, and even just a, 0.1 bias, 0.1 micromole per meter squared per half hour, per second bias over the half hour time scale accumulates to 40 grams of carbon difference in the annual sum. So I think the thing is that there's between the differences in slopes and intercepts here, there's enough of a bias that it just propagates through to the annual sums in ways that leaves them substantially offset no matter what gap filling you're using.
all right, we got to end there. That's obviously lots of discussion to have for later outside. So we're going to move on. Good job, you see it. We're going to move on to Gil. Yeah. Very good. Yutia, can you stop sharing, please? Does mine need to come up? Well, my mic is now here. I have a special mic. Okay, and so Gil, you have 10 minutes plus 2 for questions. Hit it.
Hi. So I will show you today results from I will show you today. I understand her much better now. This is very awkward. I share results from 2 different studies in our site trying to highlight the need for long-term data series and combining tree-level measurements to some patch-level conclusions related to hydrodynamic behavior of trees. So technologically, we're coming to an exciting point. With remote sensing, there's the capability to observe almost every tree on Earth. We can, with combining LiDAR, high-resolution visible images, all kinds of other sensors can really give us information of what every tree in the forest look like, structure-wise, color-wise, but not necessarily what they do or feel. Whereas evapotranspiration, we can only measure at the footprint large-scale plot. Modeling-wise, we have models like ELM Fates and other models that can, again, represent every tree in a scaled-up version. But it's very rare that people actually observe trees in a way that scale to a plot. So that now that we have the capability to incorporate it, we need the observation to put sense into that modeling capability. So we've been running a very long-term observations at the UMBS site. This is in northern Michigan, USUMB and USUMD, if you're using AmeriFlux data. Here I'm highlighting, together with the eddy covariance tower that's running since 2000, we have set up a large scale of plots of band dendrometry. We've set up a very large array of hundreds of subflow sensors. We have water content measurements in tens of trees. And together, I'm trying to combine this to a tree-to-plot scaling of really the tree behavior. So here's our this is soon to become public interface of the tree level data set. So the big circles in the middle are the flux towers. The green is UMB, the orange is UMD. And within the footprint of the flux tower, we set up experimental plots. In each plot, we are measuring tens of trees with band dendrometer every year. And every 5 years, we measure the dBH of all the trees in the forest. And within some of the plots, we have subflow sensors to many of those trees as well. And with this interface, you'll be able to click each plot, choose a tree, get all the data for the tree, or download the whole data of everything if you can handle that. So some cool things that you can see, for example, something that totally surprised us when we started looking at the climate. So climate change in Michigan, what do we know, what do we feel, what kind of changes does our site experience? So we knew that soil moisture is decreasing, but only since we ran the analysis for drought. Drought is not increasing. It's just becoming slightly less wet on average, but the extreme behavior is not changing. So we actually get a little bit less of the drizzly rains and not more drought, which we found strange. The annual stem growth didn't show much change. So if you're just looking for a correlation of everything with time, so you can say, okay, this grew because climate change, which is maybe a false correlation. That's not even happening. So stems are doing very consistent stuff. Sorry. And GPP is showing a slight increase over the year. I think mostly because the first 2-3 years had very relatively low GPP. Okay, so what I think we find we did run a correlation. There's actually almost zero correlation between GPP and growth. So the annual amount of photosynthesis doesn't translate to the annual amount of growth overall. In fact, in some time lags, it's even negative. So it's counterintuitive. When the tree photosynthesizes more, the stem grow less. And that can be for many reasons, some of them mostly because of allocation decisions that the trees are making, where to put that carbon, maybe to the roots, maybe to leaf, to things that don't translate to stem growth. When we break it down, all the trees in the forest, separate them to isohydric trees and anisohydric trees, so separate them by their hydrodynamic behavior. We see a very contrasting pattern where the isohydric trees actually like it wet. So when the soil is dry, they grow less, which is what you would expect. Whereas the anisohydric trees do the exact opposite. When the soil is dry, they grow more, which can only one interpretation of this. There's a competition for light in a sense. So in those years when the anisohydric trees are depressed, where the isohydric trees are depressed, the anisohydric trees can go crazy, or maybe other reasons. We don't understand exactly, but I think it's exciting. So it's not, this is something where you have to combine the tree level and the tower observation to kind of get at this kind of difference of behaviors between trees that are mixed within the footprint. So now we can try and put it in a model, and by chance I already have a hydrodynamic model that can resolve water flow in individual trees. We recently developed a scaling approach to if you model those, if you combine model trees, each model tree representing a different tree structure and behavior combination. So large isohydric trees, small isohydric trees, or large maples, medium maples with large oaks and medium oaks, all growing in the same model plot. You figure out that the scaling is quite tricky, because for the isohydric model, you are representing each tree as a stem, but then a stem has its own diameter, but it supports a crown with a much larger coverage area, which a much larger tree leaf area per ground area, where all the fluxes are per ground area. So things need to add up in ways that are not intuitive to models that don't work at the tree level. But we solved that. Put in the model. The other cool thing the model allows you to do is define hydrodynamic traits in a very geeky way that biologists will probably object to. But in a way, if I have a model describing the hydrodynamics, the parameters of said model I define as traits. So rather than something loosely observable as the trees respond to stress this way or the other, I can say the value of C3 will change for isohydric trees is high, for anisohydric trees will be low. And there are not too many. There's only 3 equations that describe the whole hydrodynamic, and they don't have too many parameters. So we can define the core traits in a cool and exciting way, which is totally quantifiable. So what I'm arguing is if we can run the model in a way that represents reality well, we can then observe the parameters of the model that recaptured reality and say that these are model-enabled observations of those hydrodynamic traits. So the way to make it all behave in a way, so to run a model so we have different data streams. We have subflux, we have evapotranspiration, we have tree water content, each of them on a different number of trees, each of them at a different scale and resolution, some at the plot scale, some at the tree scale. We can combine all of these observation streams into a multidimensional optimization and parameterize multiple parameters within the model. That takes skill. We have the Bayesian optimization for everything, which we call BOA, is a super exciting optimization toolpack, very nice to work with. Go try it yourself. It can parameterize anything, no matter what language is written in it. It's not a function you should call. It's a procedural wrapper that's wrapping your own model. So try it. We set it up to work with our hydrodynamic fetch model. And of course, we got amazing results. So for every tree, we can replicate subflux very accurately. For the whole plot, we can replicate evapotranspiration very accurately. And the cool things we can do now is then use observations from the model. So for example, the water potential of the stem is not something you would typically observe, but the model tells us for each of those trees what's the water potential. And we can use combination of water potential and water storage in the trees, again, hardly a rare and a non-observable property, but very important one, to define hydraulic limitation and hydraulic stress in trees. And we see very good, I'm there. And then the next step from there is we get emergent hydrodynamic stress. So for example, we can show the relationship between soil moisture and vapor pressure deficit to the daily minimum stem water potential, which we find is a very important definition of hydraulic stress. I'm done.
Really wanted to use this button. Took it from me. It's okay. Do we have any questions? We have time for a couple questions.
Gil, I was just wondering, this is curiosity, just did you by any chance look at the long-term growth and the long-term flux? I know that the interannual GPP did not translate to growth, but did it converge over time? You know?
We did not check GPP for more than, so we checked them at annual time step. We did not check the 5 years. I don't know how much data will be left when you take it down to like 5 years. It's only 25 years of data, you know, but.
Thanks. It was too fast for me, the last part, the
He
emergent.
made me do it.
The emergent hydraulic trade, could you maybe a little bit explain a little bit more? What was the last slide that you showed? Is it related to the residual stomatal conductance that some yeah.
It is not. So the hydraulic traits, the hydraulic classifications of behavior, things like isohydric and anisohydric, are based on observation. Something that I argue is that isohydric, anisohydric as an observation developed because this is as a definition developed because this is something we can observe. Put a pressure bomb on the leaf, do pre-dawn, midday. But this is very, very intensive observation. You cannot repeat it every day for many trees in the same plot and kind of scale it. So it's some vague knowledge you have about what the trees are doing. But in essence, it's relating the tree response to an environmental stressor. So you are assuming that isohydric plants close stomata when water potential gets low because either VPD is very stressing or soil moisture is low. And that's an implicit assumption of relating isohydricity to a hydraulic trait. What we did here is kind of redefine it as something that we can measure, not in reality, but in the model. So model-based, model-augmented observations. So I can redefine that as the response curve. And these are different response curves. So what would the tree do? How would the daily stem minimum water potential, which we find is a strong control on. So if we define the degree of stress the tree has, is how much the tree is limiting its evapotranspiration relative to potential evapotranspiration. So how much stomata is closed despite, so how much less evapotranspiration you do despite the atmospheric demand. So we find is controlled by the daily minimum. It's a very strong correlation between that and the daily minimum water storage. And then we show you that daily minimum water storage is very tightly predictable by both VPD and soil water content, but kind of in an opposing and interesting way, and to different extents in isohydric and anisohydric trees.
Okay, we have to move on. Let's give Gil another hand. Nice job. Okay, now we have Yang Gu from Boston University.
Just a sec, sorry. Okay. Hey everyone, my name is Yang, a second-year PhD from Boston University. Today, I'm going to share my recent study about the application of a hybrid data assimilation and machine learning algorithms to estimate the carbon fluxes across entire North America. So, according to this 2024 global carbon budget, we can see the land carbon has become one of the world's largest and most variable components of the entire Earth's carbon cycling. And because it is really important, different approaches has been made to quantify, estimate, and monitor the global carbon cycling. But according to this SACR 2 annual report, we can see we have a lot of approaches to estimate the carbon flux, but the results remain highly uncertain and conflicted if we use different methods and data sets. Therefore, we need a method that is at high level. We need a method that can account for all the uncertainties and getting the better results. Therefore, in our study, we use the data assimilation method. It can allow us to account for all the uncertainties and all the data from various platforms and getting unbiased pictures of the entire global carbon cycling. So by doing this, it can allow us to solve the following questions. First, what is the temporal and spatial distributions of land carbon fluxes across North America? And how well do we predict them? And how to reduce the uncertainties of the carbon fluxes from multiple sources. So what is data assimilation? I just removed the formal parts. It's just a flowchart. So in the field of ecology, I think data assimilation is a statistical method by fusing the observations to the system and to get the more accurate results and less uncertainty results by time. So when t equals to 1, we can have the initial conditions with the carbon and water pools and the fluxes, along with the meteorological drivers and model parameters into the model. In my study, it will be the SIMNet model. And after we run the model, we can get the forecasting results, which is slightly different from the initial conditions. And then we can incorporate the observations to the system to get the better results and constrain the uncertainties. In this study, we chose the remote sensing data, including the LGB, REI, soil water, and soil organic carbon to the system. And doing the Kelvin calculation and get the posteriors and the reanalysis results of the carbon fluxes and the carbon pools. It is by doing this, we can have a more accurate results with less uncertainty. And then the reanalysis results will become the initial conditions when t equals to 2. It is a time loop. So theoretically, these results will be enhanced by time. But we need to consider about one thing, that the errors of the carbon fluxes accumulates in time. So it makes it very hard to predict because most of the variables in ecology, they are scalars, but the fluxes, they are vectors. So it is like the carbon fluxes results, it's remain high uncertain. So we need to find another way to improve our reanalysis results to make the better forecast. So in this study, we developed machine learning algorithms with the purpose to debias the model SDA output of NE and LE. So in order to study the errors patterns, we need to use the observations, which is the gap field eddy currents data to get the residues. And we study the residue pattern through the XGB boost model and getting the debiased output of NE and LE. And then using that debias method, we can downscale them to a continental scale to see the spatial and temporal trends of the fluxes. So somebody might ask, why am I used XGBoost to gap fill my own data product instead of using existing FluxNet gap fill data? I did that for 2 reasons. First, there are some small gaps in the FluxNet data product that we have some predictors, some environmental responses that is not missing, but the fluxes that are missing. So by applying the XGBoost model, we can use that to fill the small gaps. And second, because the initial conditions of the SDA system requires the error distribution. So I should account for the gap filling uncertainties. So because of those two, I need to gap fill my own gap filling results for the eddy currents towers fluxes results. So I use the predictors from the eddy currents towers. And by the good data, I use the eddy currents flux data with a QC it's equal to 0. And then I need to generate ensemble-based training sets. So so the training set is a 25-fold repeated random subsampling of good data. And I put all those training sets to the XGBoost model. If it passes the cross-validation, I can have this ensemble-based gap fill data sets for all of the 193 sites, which is the FluxNet data that are valid from 2012 to 24. So the middle, like those 2 plots are the results, the example results for the CA ARB sites, illustrating the my gap fill results. Instead of generating some single points in the same time, like I generate the prediction intervals. So yeah, it is a distribution of the results, like not a single point. So after, and this is the gap filling results. The purple block, it's the missing data point. So, and this is the uncertainty estimation results for the NE. As we can see from this heat map, like the color that stands for the width of the prediction intervals. We can see in the summer times, the uncertainties remains high, which makes sense because in the summer times, higher temperature, the plants are more productive, so it has a higher uncertainties. And but the heat map, it is only stands for the uncertainties for gap filling. And the regression model at the right part, it is the uncertainty for the observations. So it also makes sense because as the absolute values of NE went higher, the standard deviation also went higher. Same. The LE and NE share the similar trends. The heat maps of the LE is not significant as NE, but we can also see the trend, like in the summer times, it is like the uncertainties are higher. So that's the regression model. And then after we get those gap field results, we are going to use them to calculate the residuals and study the patterns of the errors and to getting the debiased version of the carbon fluxes. So those are the 8,000 site selection from the original SDA output. And for each land cover types, we build a sub-XGBoost model. And using, for test the generalization of the machine learning algorithms, we use the Lewin set-out cross-validation and getting the debiased output for all the 8,000 sites using the data from MODIS, GL, DAS, and ERA5. And after you get those debiased output, we can use the random forest downscaling method to downscale the maps for NE and LE with the spatial resolution of 1 kilometers. So this is my results for NE, like for the debiasing results. As we can see from this, from the hex map. Okay, so this is reflects the geographical distributions of the sites. Considering those, those part as Florida and that part is Alaska. And we can see like without the debiasing method, the R-score is pretty small. And with the debiasing process, like the R-score increased. And from for the Florida part and the southern part of America, like it works well. And like the plot down here, it shows the delta R-score, which means the debiasing R-score minus the original R-score. As you can see for most sites, the results improved. Yes. And this is the comparisons between SDA and debiased output for LE, similar to NE, but in the LE part, all of the sites, they are like improved significantly. So that's the hex map. So this is the downscaling results for the NE from the year 2012 to 2024. As we can, and this is my data products, like this is my results over the last 13 years. As we can see from the map, the yellow one is like means like the NE fluxes is balanced, and the higher values means like more carbon dioxide is emitted to the atmosphere, and the green one means like it sinks a lot of carbon dioxide. As we can see from this map, like the southern part of America and New England, and some part of the agricultural land in the Midwest, and some part of Mexico. Sorry, fast to be. Like there's a carbon sink, but from the tundra areas and the other parts of the Midwest and the West, like it is very close, like it is very balanced. And this shows the trend of the NE from the last 13 years. Like this values means the slope. For each grade, we calculate the regression models. So the red ones, the higher values means the size turn from a carbon sink to a carbon source. So the purple ones means like it comes from a carbon source to a carbon sink, like it like absorbs more carbon dioxide. So it's a worrying situation. It's like in the tundra areas, taiga areas, and New England, even some agricultural regions in Midwest, like it is bigger than 0. So it means like they are like emitting more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. But the from good part is like in the Florida and the southern part of America, they are still like sinking more carbon dioxide. And this is the results for the LE. This is as shown from the maps, as we can see, as the latitude went higher, like the LE value is decreasing. Yeah.
Gotta go.
Yeah. Those are the trends for the LE. As far as quick, like, yeah. Conclusion of future works.
All right, you
Thanks.
can talk to Young. Good job, Young. We have no time for questions, but thank you very much. All right. Okay, Ching. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ching Zhu from Berkeley Lab. All right. Wrong side. Are you bringing that up here? Yeah, great. You have 10 minutes. Don't make me press that.
Yeah.
That's yours. Awesome.
Is to move on.
Yes, the arrows.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Qin Zhu from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I label myself as a modeler, so I really appreciate the opportunity here to talk to the site PI. You'll see your site might be the site location that I really focused on and interested in. And I wanted to share our recent work on the long-term dynamics of wetland methane emission across many AmeriFlux sites. And this is a collaborative work, so I wanted to appreciate my team workers. This is from AI for Methane Working Group. This is an NSF-funded working group. It's been 2 years, and we likely will have another 1 or 2 years. So this working group really wanted to use methane as a use case, but the idea is to develop a new way to model the ecosystem flux with combining of knowledge and also AI. So we are not going to use any existing tools. We are going to build new tools and for the community to use, and this is highly customized. You can embed your knowledge into it. So I will just showcase my demonstration at some AmeriFlux sites. And just to start, we have the working group has a very high a motivation. We wanted to synthesize methane-related data all the way from metagenomics to microbial traits, and then to chamber and AC towel flux, all the way up to the atmospheric concentration, column concentrations. And the goal is to really understand the global budget and regional budget. So you can tell those are, although at different scales, those are the data sets really give you a bit of the information, a part of it. But if you synthesize them and put them together, and you have a powerful framework to digest all the data, and that will give you a much more complete picture comparing with the current understanding. I started this discussion with the situation that we really have a very high discrepancy between bottom up and top down at global scale. So I highlight in the red box. The light green is the top down inversion. GCP methane estimate of global wetland methane emission, and then green is the bottom up estimate. You see they're different, and it's been different for decades. So you wonder what's happening here, why we are not improving it from the 2016 version to 2019 version. My story is, because I'm running one of the GCP methane model for this collaborative work. And when I work in the 2016 version, I think our bottom-up estimate is too high. So what I do, I tune it, I make it lower, but somehow all other modelers just think in the same way. We want it to be lower to be more compatible, more consistent with the top-down inversion. And so suddenly in the 2019 version, you see the green bar decline. So this is my story, my perspective, and there are a lot of going on behind this. But really the issue is they don't agree. So what's happening here? I think the solution will be coming from surface surface truths or the ground measurements that AmeriFlux or other surface measurements that can provide you in terms of a magnitude and long-term trends and their contribution to the atmospheric concentration. Another thing that really motivates this is if you look at the concentration trend and also C13 trend, it really tell you the underlying mechanism. That's the biogenic source. So you do expect to see a long-term increase in the wetland methane emission. Do you see that at the site or from the multi-model ensemble approach? No, we don't. We don't see that strong trend. Why is that happening? Because I think part of the reason is methane emission records is much shorter than the CO2. You don't have 20 years of measurements. You cannot identify trends, and that also motivates this work. We wanted to make use of the relatively short records of methane emission and then make it embedded into our knowledge-guided machine learning framework and reconstruct a long-term trend from 2000 to 2024, so that you can investigate long-term trends and investigate the budgets across different ecosystems, wetland ecosystems. Okay. We don't use the FluxNet V1, although the version 2 is ongoing, and we expect to see more sites, particularly across tropics and longer records, of course. But we took 11 sites from the most recent AmeriFlux database. Why? Because we have a criteria. The sites needs to be measuring methane flux longer than 8 years. Then we use it. And so I plot here in the bar are the site availability. So you'll see most of the observations there after 2010. And we wanted to reconstruct the record all the way from 2000 to 2024. And in the background shaded blue line is the background warming trend, warming signal normalized across all the sites. So you see there is a increasing temperature, of course, but during the measurement period, you don't expect that the temperature can really explain what you observe at your site with these relatively short records. Okay, so what we did is we tried to solve these two questions. One is, have wetland methane increased over the past decades, 2 decades or 2.5 decades? This is an open question. I don't think we have the answer yet. The longest measurements happens to be a chamber measurements in the Western Siberia sites. They do show some increasing trend, but others we don't see that. And if I'm wrong, site PI, please have a chat. And secondly, if there are trend and there are budgets, why they are different or how they are different across wetland types. So normally we will think wet tundra, fen, bog, marsh, and swamp, they are different wetland types. They have different underlying controls processes. So you don't expect to see same budgets or same trend. So why that is happening? We try to solve this question. I'm gonna give you the results first, and then I will dig into some technical details that you might not be interesting. So first result, is there an increasing trend? At least based on our reconstruction, we see increasing trend over Arctic region. And very interestingly, this trend decline with latitude. So although we don't have tropical sites, the warmest site is the Everglades site. That's a subtropical marsh. And there's very little trends over there, but be aware of this trend reconstruction. This is intensity, so flux intensity. If you really wanted to link it to global budget or regional budget, you also have the wetland inundation trend as well, and you multiply them together, that give you the total budget emission. But in terms of flux intensity, we do see very strong decadal trend, and particular over Arctic regions and cold regions, and that decline with latitudes. The strongest trends occur at the BZF site. That's a permafrost salt wetland, a fen site, and it increased roughly 14% per decade. Okay, so that's a big number. So imagine in the future, the warming will accelerate, and you will see a very strong signal there. But at least the current magnitude is small. So if even you multiply 14%, it's still small. Unfortunately, over tropical or warmer sites, you don't see increasing trend, but they're increasing trend in the inundation area. So this is a very complex story. If you really wanted to link this to the global budgets, you will see regional wetting and regional drying, particularly over tropics. Africa is wetting very significantly in the past decades. So even though you don't expect to see a trend in the intensity, but you'll expect to see a total emission increase. Okay, so this is the first conclusion. And second, site budgets reconstruction. The highest emission sites, Old Woman Creek. I'm always curious because there must be story or underlying mechanism that help me to further understand this system. But it stands out that mean annual temperature is around 10 degrees C. So it's not that warm, but the emission is really high. The first panel is salt with temperature, second mean annual temperature, mean annual precipitation. The last one is salt by GPP. So Old Woman Creek doesn't have a warm enough temperature, high enough precipitation, or high enough GBP, but it ends up with a very high emission. So there's a very interesting reconstruction, and I like to further look into that. And also two other sites, LA2 and ELM, those are the subtropical marsh sites. There's no surprise, you have a high emission there, but really this tells you that temperature, precipitation, and GBP, they cannot give you the complete story. There must be some other pieces that we're missing here, maybe nutrient, maybe the lateral import of carbon substrates. Something is happening. Okay, so these are the major results. So, and a little bit on the technical details, we will have an AI breakout in the afternoon. We will have a more detailed discussion there. But what do I mean by knowledge-guided machine learning? I'm not saying the traditional method is not working, but we really wanted to bring domain knowledge into the AI framework directly, not just using the data to constrain a model. So what do I mean by knowledge? It can be anything. If you're modeling GBP, maybe the most important thing you worry is the CO2 fertilization effect. You want to see a very strong and consistent response of GBP to CO2, and you want that be explicitly coded in a model. For methane, I will give you two examples here. One is a temperature response. I think everyone agree on it. People do warming experiments and expect to see high emission when you warm up the system. So that's the Q10 parameters. And the Q10 has a biogeochemistry meaning and also has a observed range. And we wanted to make sure that is happening also in the AI model as well. Substrate control, there is a diverse opinion about it. Different models. So I just surveyed 16 GCP methane models and see what the knowledge they put into the process-based model so we can leverage on. And for the substrate control, sometimes they use the labile carbon, sometimes use heterotrophic respiration or MPP. Those are proxy, those are not real substrates. So what we do is we use GPP as a substrate proxy, and to make sure the response of methane emission to GPP must be positive because you expect to see high substrates, high emission. I expect to see a certain range of Q10 that we independently survey warming experiments. So that give you a sense of how this warming response strengths will be. Last sentence, put them together into the AI model, then you have this reconstruction. I'm going to skip this. And the summary is just those two slides, major results slides. And last sentence is, if you're interested, let's have a talk. If you're curious what we are doing, we're very open. Just let me know or let Kyle know. Kyle helped me to organize this sub-working group. We focus on trend and budget. So we have regular meeting. Let's work together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Qing.